But the media seem to have blown this out of proportion, which, I don't know, that seems completely out of character for the media. Weird. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. I'm your host Simon. This script, as always, written by Danny. Cruise ships are an environmental train wreck. I actually heard about this. I think I saw a headline about something about how they're terrible for the environment, and I thought it would be interesting to explore, so here we go. When the peculiar inhabitants of planet Earth complain about toxic pollution getting belched out of vehicles and poisoning the environment, it's usually either cars or aircraft that get most of the blame. It's been noted with some irony in recent times that Prince Harry has been launching a bold new environmental initiative and preaching eco-friendly messages around the world while simultaneously boarding 4 private jets in the space of 11 days. Why, he's got to get back and somewhere else and then back again in less than 2 weeks. Still, some of those flights were very important. One of them was a trip to catch up with his good pal Elton John at his holiday home on the French Riviera, and you could hardly expect the Duke of Sussex to fly Ryanair. I didn't even like flying Ryanair. Then there were the Live Earth concerts from 2007, which brought together more than 150 big-name live acts in 11 locations around the world to help raise awareness about environmental issues, and you can bet they all flew there. Unfortunately, on their own planes. Unfortunately, thanks to dubious traveling arrangements of some of the artists, it ended up being dubbed private jets for climate change, and it's estimated that the total carbon footprint of the concert was about 74,000 tons. Private jets and aircraft in general may whip up a storm of bad press when it comes to environmentally unfriendly travel, but coming back down to earth for a moment, cars and other road vehicles tend to get a lot of stick for the current state of our planet. And rightly so. Not helped along by Thomas Midgley Jr.'s discovery of the handy benefits of leaded gasoline in 1923. Since then, cars have been sputtering poisonous fumes into the planet's atmosphere for decades, so it's no surprise that people who care about the environment would much rather you left the car at home and cycled into work. Indeed, Thomas Midgley here, he's a guy who invented leaded gasoline, which we don't use anymore, but it basically belched tons of lead into the environment for decades. Did a whole video about that train wreck. I'm not going to link to it below, but if you search Thomas Midgley Business Blaze, you will find it. Or jumped on a skateboard, a Segway, a space opera, a pogo stick, anything really, just not a car. But it does sometimes feel that not nearly as many people are complaining about travel by sea. I'm not talking about setting sail on a yacht to harness the natural power of the winds, because obviously that doesn't have any environmental impact. I'm talking about, although the number of people you see sailing boats, and it's like whenever I see a sailing boat, it's always just puttering along with its little motor going. When I see it, how often do you actually see not like a topper or whatever, but like a big yacht and it's actually using the sails? Rarely. I'm talking about climbing on board a great big stinking cruise ship which is burning thousands of gallons of dirty bunker fuel every day to ensure that you and about 3,000 other thrill seekers. I don't imagine people who go on cruises as thrill seekers. They'd be like, "Oh, Grandma, where are you going on holiday?" "I'm going on a cruise, Simon." And they'd be like, "You wild one, Grandma." Or if my last cruise was anything to go by, a chance to be violently sick in the swimming pool. Oh man, I've never been on a cruise. Especially never been on a cruise with like those cruise ships where they have swimming pools. You're like swimming in a pool on a boat in water. It's like waterception. Also, throwing up in a pool. Dude, not a good time. The British-American company Carnival Corporation is the largest cruise operator in the world, boasting a fleet of 102 vessels which transport around 11.5 million passengers every single year. You might think that the environmental impact of a relatively small fleet of ships carrying such a large volume of passengers would barely be a drop in the ocean when compared to, say, the 260 million cars on the roads of Europe every day. But according to a report from the European think tank Transport and Environment, you'd be several million nautical miles away from the truth. The report claims that the amount of pollution emitted by just this single fleet of Carnival cruises is 10 times worse than all the cars in Europe put together. I think that's the headline I saw. But how can this be true? And is that attention-grabbing headline the whole story? Spoiler alert! It's not. The main problem can be found at the bottom of a typical tanker of dirty fuel. Although low sulfur fuel is an option for cruise ships, it's an option that's usually completely ignored in favor of marine heavy fuel oil, often referred to simply as bunker fuel. The more you know, I just assume they burn diesel or something. This is pretty nasty stuff. It's even worse than Guinness. Guinness isn't bad. Like, I can drink one and then I'm like, I don't need another Guinness for like a year. It has a tar-like consistency that is contaminated with stacks of different compounds, most notably sulfur and nitrogen. Burning this stuff is a bit like burning a tire. It's not something you'd ideally want to do in your own back garden, especially if your grumpy neighbors have got their washing out on the lake. Can you imagine like, hey, what are you doing? I've got my washing out. Burning a tire. Why? Yet Carnival are happy to burn through around 250 tons of the stuff, or 80,000 gallons of this filthy fuel every day, polluting European air with sulfur dioxide, or SOx, and nitrogen oxide, NOx. The reason? It's cheap, or at least it's a lot cheaper than low sulfur alternatives, which is why bunker fuel is pretty much the cornerstone of the cruise industry. It makes sense. If it's cheaper, they're gonna use it. Like it's a company. Both SOx and NOx are widely accepted to be both harmful to human health and responsible for acid rain. SOx in particular has been officially classified as toxic and corrosive by the UK's Health Protection Agency and can cause nausea, stomach pain, vomiting, and damage your lungs and airways. That's awesome stuff then. It's the major European tourist destinations that are bearing the brunt of these toxic pollutants. Spain, Italy, Greece are right at the top of the list for exposure to SOx air pollution, while Barcelona and Venice are among the most impacted European port cities. Yeah, because it's like these incredibly dirty giant things come into a port and burn tons of nasty chemicals right where everyone's hanging out. It's not all down to the fact that these are some of the most popular tourist spots for cruise holidays though. It's also down to the looser rules and regulations on sulfur fuel standards in these places, giving companies like Carnival the freedom to happily burn as much stinky bunker fuel as they like along all of those beautiful coastlines. Still, perhaps this new report will spur Carnival into action and prompt them to put their house in order. Yeah, I'm sure it won't. Yeah, just like, guys, here's a report on how you're being really polluting. Oh, thanks so much. This looks fascinating. We're absolutely going to take that into consideration. Thank you so much. Well, it has to be said, they don't have a great track record when it comes to dealing with environmental issues. What a surprise. Again, it's like, do you want to spend more money? No, I'm good. Thanks. In fact, it's pretty appalling, and the company is already on a 5-year probation period from the US courts, who are threatening to block the company's cruise ships from arriving in US ports. And who can really blame them? This dates back to a federal court case in 2017 when Carnival were fined $40 million after not only being found guilty of illegally dumping contaminated waste into the ocean, but also then attempting to cover their tracks by falsifying documents and lying to US authorities about their actions. We made a video about Martha Stewart's insider trading. It's like, she didn't go to prison for insider trading. She went to prison for lying to the authorities about insider trading. It's like, this isn't good, but no one's gonna go to jail. This is just the environment, who cares? It gets worse. They were back in the US courts in 2019 accused of violating their probation with no less than 800 reported incidents, including the dumping of plastic bottles and thousands of tons of sewage into the ocean, the illegal burning of bunker fuel in protected areas. This is crazy. Can you imagine just being on a cruise ship and you're like, you wake up one morning, you go for like a walk on the deck, and there's like some Carnival employees just throwing into the ocean. You're like, guys, what's up? And it's like, nothing's going on. We're responsibly disposing of these bottles. Obviously, this is a comedy effect, and that never happened. Weirdly, many of the new charges involve not doing enough to stop drunken passengers throwing chairs and other bits overboard. One of the major concerns that the government has with cruise ships is they're polluting the ocean because they get people too drunk and then they throw shit in the ocean. That's quite amazing. I always thought these cruises were meant to be civilized affairs. Look, Danny, I don't know, cruises have like unlimited booze, right? You pay like a ticket and you can go on board and drink as much as you like. At some point, furniture is getting thrown in the ocean. A federal judge was ready to slap an immediate ban on Carnival ships entering the US, but a new agreement was eventually reached in which the company was fined another $20 million and allowed to continue their probation period for another 3 years. So again, it's like, yeah, just complete, you can carry on polluting the ocean. Just give us some money. And is $20 million really a lot of money to like these cruise lines? Google got fined like billions or something insane because they were preferring that we got their shopping results at the top of Google. Their search platform. What? What is going on? This makes no sense. Taking all of this into account, it seems unlikely that the cruising industry as a whole will be willing to make radical changes to their company culture without an encouraging kick up the exhaust funnel. A report from Transport and Environment has plenty of recommendations to make, including implementing a zero-emission port standard as soon as possible, regulating NOx emissions from cruise ships, and extending emission control areas which are currently only in place around US coastlines, the North Sea, the Baltic Sea, and the English Channel. Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. We've talked about this on this channel before. Companies need to regulate themselves, or the government needs to regulate them. I'm all for like self-regulation. Like companies, go do it, because if you don't, the government's going to come in and make your life a misery. They forgot to recommend that companies like Carnival should stop dumping all their rubbish in the ocean and consider bolting down the chairs and furniture on the deck, but I imagine these just got missed in the final edit of the report. Yeah, fair enough. Bolting down the furniture would be a good idea. But, you know, depending on how drunk people get, that shit's still getting thrown in the ocean at some point. Like, come on! But here's the thing. The report isn't talking about emissions. Oh yeah, we're talking about whether it pollutes the environment as much as cars. I got completely lost. This report isn't talking about emissions of carbon dioxide or CO2, which is the key greenhouse gas driving climate change today. Instead, it's largely comparing SOx emissions between cars and cruise ships. Oh, okay. So the media were like, oh yeah, they're as bad as all of the cars in Europe, except we're going to compare some like really obscure thing that they pollute, like, or obscure for cars instead of carbon dioxide. So this is really shocking, and I can't believe this actually happens. But the media seem to have blown this out of proportion, which, I don't know, that seems completely out of character for the media. Weird. Yet about a decade ago, the EU introduced new directives to ensure that all cars in Europe are running on ultra-sulfur-free diesel. It's not technically sulfur-free, but it's about as close as we can possibly get for now. This means that SOx emissions from all the cars in Europe today is actually pretty close to zero. So you can begin to see why transport and environment are making quite an unfair comparison. It's a bit like taking one of Simon's little bottles of baby shampoo and saying that it contains more alcohol than 30 billion bottles of fizzy pop. Yes, of course it does. But so what? Yeah, exactly, it's a useless comparison. A more relevant comparison would be to try and compare the CO2 emissions between cruise ships and cars, although it's very difficult to get accurate figures here. The UK newspaper The Guardian reckons the CO2 emissions from one cruise ship carrying around 3,000 passengers is equivalent to 80,000 cars carrying 1 or 2 people, which is not 260 million? However many was it, 260 million? Yes. So if that's to be believed, we should probably take these figures with a pinch of sea salt. No. Carnival's entire fleet of ships would cause as much CO2 pollution as about 8 million cars. That's clearly very bad news in itself, but it's way off 10 times all the cars in Europe. Yeah, it is. Media. I'm so disappointed. You let me down. You misled me. Why would you betray me like this? But that's not to say there shouldn't be cause for great concern about the environmental impact of cruise ships. It's just that the headline handed out to the press was massively irrelevant. Are cruise ships bad for the environment? Without a shadow of a doubt, any industry that relies on burning 80,000 gallons of filthy fuel every day clearly needs to steer the sector in a more eco-friendly direction. Can anything be done about it? Absolutely. Yeah, didn't we discuss about how about we just introduce emission controls? Everyone has emission controls. I guess it's got to be tricky because you got to coordinate all these different countries. And I guess the cruise ships could be like, oh no, we're registered in Andorra or something like that. It's like, yeah, we're registered in Gambia. A big part of the problem is that all of these cruise ships don't even have to be moving in order to burn through tons of fuel. When a ship is in port, it still needs to run electricity for all of the restaurants and onboard entertainment. Well, they don't, plug into the shore. The ship could, in theory, hook up to shoreside electricity, but fine. But the infrastructure isn't there yet on many ships or at European ports. What? You can't plug in your cruise ship? That's insane. Another factor in this, and probably the most important one for cruise companies, is that shoreside electricity is taxed, whereas bunker fuel isn't. What? How? This insanely polluting fuel is not taxed? We're not going to tax the relatively clean electricity that you can get by plugging in, and it probably comes from renewables or nuclear? That's madness. You need to start taxing that bunker fuel, start taxing the shit out of it, because cruises are too cheap anyway, and then also start offering tax breaks or something for when they plug in. That should be, or just offer free fuel, free electricity, because then more port ships will come to your port. And it's not really going to cost you that much in total. So if the companies find it easier and cheaper for the ships to just sit, and it keeps your city clean, they're not going to be burning all of this horrific fuel basically inside your city. So the companies find it easier and cheaper for the ships to just sit there burning more dirty fuel in order to keep the guests happy. Developing a stronger infrastructure for shoreside electricity would certainly be a tug in the right direction and reduce the amount of bunker fuel needed for a typical voltage, but it would be difficult for the companies to get on board with this concept. You need incentives. There's got to be some sort of governmental incentive because companies aren't going to do it themselves. You need to either carrot or stick them, tax them, or give them something for free. A stronger idea would be to adopt a sulfur cap in which cruise companies would legally be compelled to switch over from bunker fuel containing about 3.5% sulfur to low sulfur fuel containing about 0.5% sulfur. Yeah, I mean, it's a stronger idea, but do it as well. Just get it all. Do it all. The good news is that the International Maritime Organization, made up of 173 member states, have already put this in place for 2020. Fantastic. The bad news is they've already allowed a legal loophole. I bet the cruise lobby is pretty strong. In which cruise ships can continue to use bunker fuel if they have an exhaust gas cleaning system installed, often known as a scrubber, which sprays alkaline water into the ship's exhaust stacks and is designed to reduce CO2 and SOx emissions from the vehicle's exhaust gases. This seems like a really backwards way of doing it. How about you just burn clean fuel in the first place? Come on. Come on. The latter option is more of a clunky compromise than an effective long-term solution, and ideally the cruise companies would all be switching over to low-sulfur fuel as soon as possible, but the scrubber option works out cheaper, of course it does. What was it we said the other day? Companies, they're not driven by doing the right thing, they're driven by profits. This includes the on-probation Carnival Corporation, who have seized the chance to take advantage of the loophole so that they can keep on burning bunker fuel, because of course they have. While the industry does seem to be very slowly sailing in the right direction, the cruise lines are probably going to need a lot more rigorous legal pushing and shoving before they end up at a greener destination. Yeah, push them, shove them, incentivize them. It doesn't seem that complicated, guys. Just get it together. Come on, we can sidestep the bureaucracy and figure something out. Why do we have to ruin our environment? Also, I mean, the cars are everything up anyway. But at least I feel like we're trying with those. I don't see any electric cruise ships around, so maybe there are. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, this has been Business Blaze. Thank you for Danny for putting the script together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.